today. Okay, so give me 1 second. I want to flip my screen so I can see you guys and see your comments, okay? So give me 1 second. So let's see if it's gonna work. Oh no, it's not gonna work. All right, trial and error. Okay, so please let me know if you can hear me. You guys can see me clearly. All right, and here, hello. All right, so I'm just gonna check with my assistant. Can you hear me and see me? I hope so. Okay, all right, we have 7 people who are viewing. All right. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about how do we teach reading online. Okay, I do want to apologize if we are going to have some background noises today. It seems that my neighbors have decided to exactly at this time start construction. I do have 2 dogs. I cannot control when they want to speak with us. So my apologies if they interrupt us. I will try and mute myself somehow, somewhere. Okay, so let's get started. So let me get my notes up. So as I said, we're going to be talking a little bit about how do we teach reading online, all right? If I speak too fast, let me know so I can slow it down for you guys, all right? Just so you know, I have 2 cameras, okay? So I'm not distracted. I am simply just looking at 2 different cameras, okay? So reading seems like one of the most simple things to do, right? It's simple, right? We start as kids with simple words such as truck, ball, and today we have the challenge of teaching reading online. And when we're working online, it's so hard to see the way we express words. How do we articulate words? How do we use our mouth and our tongues? And this actually all forms part of being able to read. So reading and pronunciation actually go hand in hand together, but we'll discuss that a little bit later, okay? So as I said, reading seems like one of the most simple things to do, right? But in fact, we have established that reading can be hard for adults and children alike, okay? Even in their native language. So if you're English, if you're Russian, if you're Spanish, doesn't matter. Reading can be a challenge and quite difficult for kids and adults. So let's go down to the basics of reading, okay? So we don't have a long webinar today. We're just going to go over the gist of things. You have to find your own unique style as a teacher and, of course, adapt yourself accordingly, according to your students' needs, requirements, and challenges, okay? There's no right or wrong when it comes to teaching reading, okay? So we have different kinds of reading. We have 4 main types and kinds of reading techniques, and they are the following. Some of them you will be very familiar with if you've been teaching for a while. So we have skimming, skimming we know is reading a text quickly to get the general idea or the general meaning, okay? So it can be contrasted with scanning, which is reading in order to find specific information, okay? So skimming is a specific reading skill which is common in reading things such as newspapers, messages, WhatsApps, telegrams, emails, okay? So skimming is reading a text quickly to get the general idea or the general meaning, all right? This is a skill that is difficult to learn because students get stuck on certain words and then they fixate on something that they don't understand. So skimming is something you guys really have to put pressure on. It's definitely something that you have to practice with your students, especially if you have IELTS students. If they ever want to take the IELTS exam, skimming and scanning is actually 2 things that they check for in the IELTS exam. So the second point, as we mentioned, is scanning. So scanning, we know, is reading rapidly, like really quickly, in order to find specific facts. Okay, names, numbers, dates, places, when, where, what, why, the key ideas, all right? And then we have intensive and extensive reading. Okay, so extensive reading is something that I guess students and professionals will use. All right. Extensive reading is like free reading, lots of books, reading for pleasure. It's a way of language learning. It's included in foreign language learning through large amounts of reading. So you might get students who just want to do reading. I actually have a student, she's a doctor, and she only wants to do reading, professional articles. Because it helps her formulate her sentences, it helps her see example sentences, and it helps her understand the general idea by looking for keywords and content words and making those connections. Okay, so extensive reading is like a large amount of reading for different purposes. And then we have like the light type of reading, such as an article, something short, something sweet, something simple. Okay. And then you get students who are entry level, which are using word by word reading. All right. This is your lower intermediate, pre-intermediate, your elementary level, where a student will read reading seems like one. Okay, so here you can focus on pronunciation of words. Here you can focus on new vocabulary. Many times, really strong students will still use word by word reading because they are not confident in reading out loud just yet. Okay, and then of course we have reading to study. In this case, this is also very, very difficult reading to do because it's extremely academic. In most cases, it's academic reading. All right, so this brings me to my next point. So we have now covered the 4 different main types and kinds of reading. Okay, so it's imperative that your student knows exactly how and when to use this type of reading. Okay, that's why we have the different kinds and different types of reading. All right, we use the different kinds in different situations. So when reading, we forget that we use many different cognitive processes and many different things are happening at the same time. This is why students hate reading. This is why they struggle to read, because the brain is doing 10,000 things at the same time. So what happens when a student reads? He's looking at vocabulary. He's thinking about pronunciation. What does this mean? Is he really paying attention to what is being said? So reading, as we know, is a verb. It's an action. But is the student actually understanding what is actually happening? Maybe the second or third time after reading, but for first-time readers, it can be quite challenging to manage all of these different cognitive processes, okay? So reading is engaging in an incredibly complex cognitive process that demands decoding, memorization, identification, comprehension, and motivation. Okay, so do you see why I said in the beginning, reading seems like one of the most simple things to do, right? Does it now? If we say things such as cognitive process, decoding, memorization, identification, comprehension, motivation, it sounds a little bit overwhelming right now. So now that we are in the student's shoes, let's take it a step further, okay? So reading effectively means reading in a way that helps you, well, in this case, the student, so helps you understand, evaluate, and reflect on written text. So as you can imagine, reading is a critical skill needed, especially if you work in a sphere that requires it, or if you are a student or you're a college student. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what sphere you're in, you're going to have to read, unless you're somebody who works in physical labor and so forth. That's a different skill that you need, okay? So this brings me to my next point. So how do we help our students to read and at the same time understand? And how do we motivate effective reading? Because effective reading is quite an important thing to have, or an important thing to do. Okay, so it's quite simple. We start at the beginning. You firstly need to assess your student's level. All right, is my student advanced? Is he pre-intermediate? Is he in between? Is he a mixture? You know, what are the strengths? What are the weaknesses of my student? Okay, so reading should not be too hard nor too easy, right? You have to find that sweet spot of reading, okay? If your student does not understand the reading because it's too hard, there will be absolutely no benefit in this exercise or in reading, okay? So should your student understand everything and all the words, this means there is no learning taking place, so there is no challenge, meaning there is no motivation. To put it bluntly, your student will be bored and not challenged enough, okay? So it's important to assess your student's level by giving them short reading passages of varying degrees, all right? So you have to remind your student when you're going to be assessing his level, say, hey, Vladimir, we're going to read 4 texts. Easy, medium, hard, extremely difficult, okay? Bear with me. I'm trying to assess your reading and to see what is comfortable for you, okay? So give them short reading passages of varying degrees of difficulty, just like you would do in an IELTS exam. If you don't know where to get resources for reading, guys, IELTS. IELTS has done all the work for you, okay? And you're also able to assess how quick your student can read. So you'll have a really good idea of where their strengths and weaknesses are lying, okay? IELTS is a fantastic teaching hack, and there's so many free resources out there, okay? If you get stuck, contact somebody in Skyeng and they will contact me. I don't know exactly who, but eventually you will get to me, I'm sure. Okay? All right, so make sure to check your student's level by asking probing questions. That's my next point, probing questions, all right? Check for understanding, do vocabulary checks, determine if the student can find linking or keywords in a text that helps them understand better. All right, I've discovered this with an advanced student lately, that she's very good in reading, but when I started asking her more complicated questions, you know, where's the synonym? How do you understand this text? Can you explain this text to me in your own words? And she failed to do this. And for weeks, I was under the, assumption that she could read and understand what she was reading, and she can't really grasp what she's reading. Guys, so, I mean, I've been teaching for many, many years, and to see this mistake that I've made was quite a shocker. It was quite embarrassing and a shocker for me as a teacher. So ask the questions, check for understanding, all right? Find synonyms, find those keywords, linking words. And many times on our fantastic Vim box, when they have to fill in the missing words and sentences that are based on a reading task and they're not able to do it, this usually means that they don't know how to find linking words or keywords in the text, okay? I always recommend then to copy and paste the text into a Google document so that they can highlight or find the keywords and discuss it from there. Even ask them to print it out and do it for homework. Go find those keywords, those synonyms, those linking words, and then try to answer the questions. So we have to teach them how to find the information correctly, okay? So it's not just about reading. We have to teach them how to make these connections, how to find the information, and then to understand. Many times, like I said, students get fixated on a vocabulary or on a word that they don't understand, and they just give up instead of continuing the reading process. Many times you'll find a second or even a third synonym that makes it very clear and, oh, okay, now I understand what I'm reading, okay? So try to motivate them to continue reading, because many times you'll find a word that explains the sentence or tries to express, what the person is reading at that point. Okay, all right, so do vocabulary checks and determine if a student can find linking words in the text to help them understand better. So in addition to finding linking words, keywords, you have to pre-teach difficult vocabulary. I'm pretty sure you guys are starting to see a format here, a pattern here, okay? On Vimbox, we follow the same pattern. On Vimbox, we have vocabulary introduction and maybe an audio, maybe a match activity for vocabulary, and then we have the text. There's a reason why 90% of the lessons in Vimbox is set up this way, because it helps the student prepare for either listening or reading or writing. All right, so pre-teach difficult vocabulary. Okay, this part is very important. If you know the reading text will be challenging, okay, make sure to pre-teach the vocabulary so that the student can make those connections, those linking and keywords that we talked about. Find the synonyms, apply logic and reason. Many times students will tell you, no, they understand this word, but in fact, they don't understand the word. They think they do, but they don't really understand the word. And many times I'll give them a sentence and I ask them, does this word make sense to you? What is the definition of the word? So does this word truly fit into the sentence? So really try to motivate them to ask themselves, does this make sense? Is this logical? So remember, reading is a cognitive process. It's really not about just opening a book and reading. Many different things is happening in the brain at that time. All right, so let's check if there's any information here. All right, no questions but on this page. Okay, so let's continue. So my next point is to choose the correct and appropriate content. All right, no brainer, right? But we can also mess up in this department. All right, you can't give an adult a child's storybook and a mature content such as novels to a child. Okay, obviously we won't give a kid's storybook to a child, but you do get adult books like this with words and short sentences that are appropriate for adults, okay? It's quite simple. There will be no interest, and without interest in the topic, you will have a really hard time motivating your student to read or make connections. Find your students' interests. Okay, collect reading material based on those interests and build a library for that student. All right, if it's not in Vimbox, go and find it. Even better, you can ask your student to share with you any interesting articles that they find which you can read together. I read an entire PDF book, Crucial Conversations for Managers. This was a training manual for one of my students, and we read the entire book together. It was informative, it was interesting, and it was challenging. The student needed it for her work, and she used it as her English lessons. I learned a lot from it. I would probably be a great Crucial Conversations manager today. But yeah, it's important that you truly find reading material that applies to them. Otherwise, it's going to be boring. And again, motivation. Again, motivation is linked to it. Again, the cognitive process we're talking about. All right. So I'm just going to jump back to keywords and connections because not everybody understands how to use it. Remember to underline the keywords, or point out keywords and teach the student how to work out the meaning of sentences and words without a dictionary. That's another thing. Many times when you're reading, we don't have access to dictionaries, right? So that's why we also teach keywords. So keywords can bring a lot of understanding to what the person is reading. It's important to motivate the student to continue to read the next paragraph or two, even if they don't understand the previous one. Most times, keywords make things more clear. Students can also try to find connecting words within the text which express the same meaning as other words. The reason why understanding how to use keywords and connections are rather important when a student is completing comprehension tests, exams, or studying. All right. Not just in reading, but in speech as well. I have students who are now working in global companies. They have meetings with English speakers, and they stop listening when they hear a word they don't understand, and they miss the rest of what the speaker is saying. And it's not like you can take a reading text and reread it. You can't really ask the person, hey, repeat yourself, repeat yourself, repeat yourself. So in essence, connections and keywords and linking words, we don't only use in reading, we use it in listening as well. So remember, all of these different English skills is a cognitive process, and they all link together and play a vital role. All right. So reading out loud or reading to yourself quietly, which one is better? What do you guys feel is better? How do your students respond to it? There are pros and there are cons to both, okay? The student might be very shy, very self-conscious when it comes to reading out loud. They might be shy regarding their pronunciation and all of the above, okay? But when a student reads out loud, you as the teacher can recognize when a student skips information and determine why texts are being misunderstood. And what's more is you have the opportunity to not only correct pronunciation, but intonation. My students like to read out loud twice. So they'll get a text, they'll read out loud the first time. The first time you can hear it's word for word. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of filler words such as which, you know, it's a really bad habit, and it shows that a person isn't very confident, and that's also something you will work on with your student when you're doing reading out loud. All right, so we're focusing on so many different things at the same time. We're not just English teachers. We teach soft skills. We teach them how to present themselves, how to be confident, how to read confidently, even when you're not feeling confident on the inside, right? We're so much more than English teachers, guys. Remember this, okay? All right, so as I said, you can recognize when a student skips information. You can determine why texts are being misunderstood. And what's more is you have the opportunity to not only correct pronunciation, but intonation too. Have your students read out loud twice, okay? The second time, they will be more focused and they will understand the information more clearly. This is a teaching strategy you will need to determine when to use or not to use, and with what students. So you will see which students need to work on their confidence, which students need to work on their pronunciation, who is skipping articles and prepositions and skipping words because they don't know how to pronounce them. Yes, students do this as well. They will skip a word when they're reading because they don't know what it means or they don't know how to pronounce it. And this is where you go, you know, let's help you, okay? So here you can elaborate on your teaching and help them more, all right? So teaching reading online is such a fantastic way to build a relationship with your student and address specific issues that the student is facing, okay? Sorry for the airplane that's coming across. I live near an airport. So checking for understanding, you know, how do you know if your student understood what they read? Like, no point just slapping an article there and, hey, read it. Okay, great job, you read it. There are different ways you can do this, all right? Comprehension tests are one of them. This is the most common used way of checking. We said earlier in the beginning that you need to ask, elicit some questions and see how they understood the text, okay? But comprehension tests are one of them. I like to ask my students to give me a verbal summary of what they read using their own words, maybe even synonyms of words that they saw. Without time wasted, it will be clear whether or not they truly understood the text. Just make sure you read the text before so that you also know what's going on. Okay, I know sometimes we don't always read the articles that we give to our students, but yeah, been there, done that. So yeah, it's important that you ask them to give you a verbal summary of what they read. And immediately you will know if this person understood what they were reading. And then you can ask for more detail. Okay, when did this happen? Why did this happen? And what was the result? What was the cause? When, where, reason, cause, effect. All right, we're going back to grammar here now. Okay, so checking for understanding is super, super important. And there's many ways we can do it. We can even fill in the missing word, and Vimbox provides all of that for you. But take that step further and speak with them. Have a chat about what was just read and how you both understood it. What was the most interesting fact? What surprised you? What did you find, not so interesting? Okay, so to wrap up, here are some interesting facts about reading. So did you guys know that there are six essential components necessary for reading, and they are as follow. Oral language, the ability to speak forms the earliest foundation to read. All right, this is why we start with baby books. Even if you're learning a new language as an adult, baby books are a great way to learn, just so that you know. Okay, so we read the word truck, we say the word truck. Great. Foundations of reading. Phonological awareness. Phonological awareness. What is phonological awareness? And I'm not going to give you the answer. I want you guys to pop it in the comments for me. Okay? All right. And then phonics. All right. The relationship between letter and sounds in phonics. All right. I know that many Russian teachers here are experts in phonics. Really great phonics teachers that we have amongst us. And then vocabulary, and then comprehension. So that is the 6 essential components necessary for reading. Oral language, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and comprehension. Okay? And then we have the 5 most important benefits of reading for children, because that is where it starts, right? So it improves the functioning of the brain. We're going back to cognitiveness, right? So it helps to stay fit with all the exercises we do, such as yoga and running, believe it or not. Okay, because we use the same parts of the brain. It increases vocabulary. It improves theory of mind. If you have a degree in education, or maybe not, maybe you have some educational formal training, you will know what we mean with theory of mind. Increases knowledge, and of course sharpens our memory, which is super important. Okay, so we're basically at the end of our little stream that we have today. We're going to do a quick wrap up, and then I'm going to say goodbye to you guys. So skimming and scanning, those 2 types of reading are super important. Students will use this in all different aspects of life, all right, whether they're traveling, filling in visa forms, whether they're a student or a lawyer who does a lot of reading. Okay, we have extensive reading. We always want to motivate our students to do extensive reading. So that's a large amount of reading, even if it's just reading for pleasure. It's imperative that the student knows exactly how and when to use these different kinds of readings, all right? We know that reading is a cognitive process, and that many different things are happening at the same time. So it's not just, hey, let's read something and that's it, okay? Reading is engaging, an incredibly complex cognitive process that demands decoding, motivation, identification, comprehension, and motivation, okay? It's a very critical skill that we use. So reading effectively means that it helps us to understand and evaluate and reflect on written text. And as you can imagine, reading is a critical skill needed, especially if you're working in a very reading demanding sphere. All right, so how do we do reading with students? We have to assess their ability to read. So the student's level, their skills level, okay? Reading should not be too hard or too easy. The student should be challenged a little bit, and If they understand everything, you know that they're not challenged and that they will lose their motivation. All right. How do we assess their skill? We give them varying degrees of reading difficulty. So different passages of reading difficulty. You can get this from IELTS, okay? And you check for understanding, ask probing questions, do vocabulary checks, determine if the student can find linking words and keywords. Then you do your pre-teach of vocabulary, just like we have in Vimbox. Make sure that they understand the more difficult words they're going to find in the text, all right? Prepare them for what they're going to come across so that they don't get stuck and they don't want to read further. Then choose the correct and appropriate content. What is the student's interests? Is this material appropriate for the level of the student? Okay, so that's very important. And build a library for your student. And you can also ask them to share their own resources that they're interested in with you, okay? Then keywords and connections. Print out the article. Go highlight or make the keywords and connections in bold. Look up synonyms for it. Very, very important. You know, this is how it's basically the reason why understanding how keywords and connections are rather important when a student is completing comprehension tests, exams, and studying, all right? Especially if they don't have a dictionary. This is when keywords and connections play a vital role. If you don't know the vocabulary, you're going to go find another word in the text that means the same, all right? We have a few exercises like that in the IELTS course in Vimbox, if I'm not mistaken. And reading out loud or to oneself, there are pros and cons to both. Reading out loud might be scary or maybe intimidating to students who are very shy, but this will also help build their confidence. You have the opportunity to correct pronunciation, intonation. You can hear mistakes. You can hear when they skip words they don't know how to pronounce. So you can easily see things that you won't normally recognize. So you'll be able to address those challenges directly with the student. You will save a lot of time and effort. All right, and then check for understanding. We can do this through comprehension tests, have a discussion, ask them to verbally summarize what they have read to see if they understood what they said. And that is it. What a fun webinar. All right, guys, I want to say thank you so much for joining today. It was so nice to have a full house. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or recommendations or any awesome tips on how to teach reading online, please leave them in the comments. I will check them out later. And yeah, you guys are always welcome to chat with me. You know where to find me. I'm here at Skyeng. And see you guys next time. Thank you again, and bye-bye. All right. Bye.